A very good afternoon to everyone present here. I am Richa Lamba from the first year of Masters in Landscape program.
And I'm Rushika from the second years of the Master's program in Landscape, and we will be your hosts for the day. So, very good afternoon to everyone present here today, and we welcome you all to the LA 25, celebrating 25 years of the establishment of the Landscape program. Before commencing, I would request everyone to take their seats and please switch off your mobile phones or put them on the silent mode to avoid any distractions during the course of the day. We would begin by calling upon Professor Dr. Deepa Maheshwari, Program Chair, Master's Program in Landscape, to welcome you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. A warm welcome to our President, Dr. Bimal Patel, Professor Surya, and other dignitaries and faculty of CEPT, our speakers for the day, alumni and their spouses, professionals, students, and friends. It is indeed my utmost pleasure to welcome you all today as we celebrate the 25th year of our landscape program. 25 years ago, when it commenced, I joined as a visiting faculty. And honestly, I had never envisioned this day. But here we are, and I can proudly say it has been nothing short of an incredible journey. I have witnessed this program grow like a tree, setting new benchmarks both academically and professionally by our alumni, some of whom are present here today with us. I would want my dearest alumni know that coming back to your alma mater is synonymous to homecoming. And I assure you that these 2 days will be full of nostalgia, fun, and a lot of memories that you all will be taking back with you. I am delighted to see you all coming in such a great number. Thank you. Welcome back. So, hold on to your seats as we now begin our program. I would now request our Dean, Professor Surya Kakani, to take over from here. Please, Surya.
Hi, good morning. Good afternoon now. That was quite a welcome that you gave her, and no one knows this program better than Deepa. Once again, thank you all for turning up in such large numbers. I'm told that 40% of the alumni is here with us, and that number makes us all very happy to see that all of you could make time and take time and make this a great event. I've been teaching here for a long time. I've been teaching in various capacities, in various studios. I even taught, I think, around 12 years ago or 10 years ago with Aniket. I took a studio in landscape also. So, and it has been actually an extremely learning experience, being involved in different kinds of areas, working at CEPT. You see, actually, the amount of work that's gone, what I've seen here and what's been put up at the basement, in Sagra basement, in Deepa and her colleagues have put in incessant hours of work. Really, this is amazing, the kind of effort that her team has put up, and that really makes one feel very warm to see that the response to that. I myself can't wait to see what these 2 days hold for you. And even after 2 days, I hope to see this association between the alumni and the students prosper as it goes ahead. And I really would like now for you all to spend. I do wish that some of you would be able to take more time off and come and visit us more often and be part of the academia, whether as jurors. If you can give more time, please do come. We would like you to teach. Do get in touch. Well, I'll take not much more time here. I'd request Dr. Bimal to start the inaugural speech, and after that, Mohan will address and give us a speech. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So welcome everybody, and thank you very much for coming back to CEPT. I have great honor of, in some ways, flagging off your celebrations of 25th anniversary. And I'm going to try and talk a little bit about the history of this place and about the people who have made this. So, as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I learned it 2 days ago from her properly. The program started in 1993 with 4 students. That was the first batch. Of course, it was initiated by Professor Bhagwat, the Bade Sahab, and it offered a diploma in landscape architecture. It was a 3-semester program. Then it chugged along for a while, 7 years, and in the year 2000, it became a 4-semester program. So some of you got off easy, the rest of you had to do 4 semesters. Wasn't easy? Oh well. Then, by that time, the student strength had grown to about 12 students, 10 or 12 students. And then the big milestone is in the year 2002, when instead of a diploma, people started getting degrees. So, you know, I studied at CEPT also, in long before this. And I also got a diploma, so I can see some of you feeling bad about it. I didn't get a degree. It was called equivalent to a degree. But anyways, master's degree. In 2003, Professor Bhagwat started ISOLA. He was the founding president of that, so that was another big event in that time. In 2005, CEPT became a university. We were earlier affiliated with North Gujarat University, and before that we were completely autonomous. But 2005 we became a university, and in 2005 the landscape program also hosted the first ISOLA International Conference at Mumbai. So that's another big event. I hope I'm not using up all your data. She said, I'm going to say this tomorrow. I said, nah, I'll use it up today. Too bad, but you have other stories to tell. Okay. Then 2011, you had the 7th ISOLA National Conference at Ahmedabad, CEPT Landscape Program Alumni Meet, 2011, so that must have been your 15 years, I guess. And 7 and 11, no, I don't know what it was. It was an alumni meet. And so that was a big thing then. In 2012, the first batch of landscape design was admitted. So these were people who did not have an architecture background, but had a background in other fields and wanted to do landscape architecture. And then there was a big symposium in 2013. 2015, we lost Bhagwat Sahab. That was a sad thing for the program. And 2016 was Landscape Perspective Seminar with Sheffield University. The program has been growing. By this time, it has 24 students, and 2017 already you have 25 years complete. So it's a program that has a long history now. It has 307 people who have graduated from it. They are all well placed. You're all 40% of you are back. I see many familiar faces here, and they're doing work all over the country in various capacities, and that is something to feel really good about. What we must do at this point is, of course, take a minute to talk about 2 people. Bhagwat Sahab first. Just remember that he was the person who started this off. He was born in 1930, educated in University of Pune to start with, then went off and studied his postgraduate studies in Holland. He specialized in a lot of different things like agriculture, plant breeding, soils, horticulture, etc. He was really well equipped to work in this field. Then he was a guest scholar with Royal Academy of Fine Arts, Copenhagen, Denmark. Okay, so he spent some time there, Denmark. After that, at the University of Durham in UK. So he, you can see, had a lot of different, lot of exposure from European countries, and unlike a lot of people, he returned back. And he was also associated with IIT Kharagpur. He started practicing landscape as a landscape architect in 1955-58. He was with the Empress Botanical Gardens in Pune. Then 1959 to 65, he was with IIT Kharagpur, working on various professional assignments as well as academic work there. He was member secretary of the Damodar Valley Regional Development Team. That's a really sort of vast assignment. Then he was associated with the National Institute of Design, just as it was getting set up in 1965 to 72. He was head of the Department of Environmental Planning there. Then in 72, 73, he was at the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi. Okay, so he was very much associated with that. In 1973, he opened his professional office, started a lot of professional work after that. We are familiar with a lot of that work. And in 1993, established this program to take the field of landscape architecture further. And as I said, he passed away in 2015. So, an illustrious career, and it is terrific that the seeds that he sowed at that time have now grown into this program, and very much involved with him right from day one in this program was, of course, Deepa Maheshwari, who got a wonderful, rousing applause from all of you when she came up here. So I can see how well loved she is and how everybody recognizes that she is the person who has been the absolute spine for the program, the backbone for the program. She continues to run it really well. Well, you know, she told me she comes from Delhi. I said, are you Ahmedabad girl or a Delhi girl? She said, I'm a Delhi girl. So she's a Delhi girl. She studied biology. Correct me if I'm wrong. Botany. There, first mistake. Studied botany, and then she studied at the School of Planning and Architecture, got her landscape degree from School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. Then guess what? She got married. She got married to a chartered accountant in Ahmedabad, and so she moved here. That was, I think, in 1990. Deepa Maheshwari comes to Ahmedabad. That's what I've written. Yes. And then in quick succession, 2 kids were born. The second one was born on the 26th of July, 1993. And on 27th of July, 1993, the landscape program started. So she's, you know, very efficient. She finished all of that and says, okay, all of that done. Now I'm on. So there she was teaching in the program. Professor Bhagwat knew her and must have met her in Delhi and had told, and he must have recognized this is a person I could make good use of when she, and luckily for him, she moved to Ahmedabad. So there she was, ready, second kid done with and ready to teach. In 1996, when her second kid was 3 years old, I guess, she became a full-time lecturer at the program. In the year 2000, she became assistant professor, and in 2016, she completed her PhD. No, 2007, 2006, not 7, 6, no? 6. Finished her PhD, and 2007, she became full professor. Well, she's program chair, continues to run the program. She's the backbone of the program. What do I say? She told me that there is a wonderful bunch of people who are presently teaching at the faculty, and she says that it's in good hands, and there are 4 key people who are taking the program forward now. And the first of them is Sandeep Patil, who is here somewhere. Bobby Sujan? Bobby Sujan? Anjali Jain, and Divya Shah. So you can see that the program is in good hands. I told her, I said, listen, all of us must try and figure out who's the next person, who's going to do who's going to carry things forward. And that's true for every place, not just this program, everywhere. We have to think. And she said, Pat came the reply, I have 4 good people, programs in good hands, and we will do well, don't worry about it. So I was really pleased to hear that. So, very good. Thank you very much for that. You will get a chance. Let me spend a few minutes talking a little bit about where CEPT University is headed. You'll get a chance. Some of you are coming back after many years. How many of you coming back from many years? Yeah, 20 years. Yeah. So some of you are coming back after many years, and you get a chance to go around the campus and look at things. Even in 20 years, perhaps the school has grown. Actually, it's grown quite a bit. When I was a student here, which was, I don't want to say when, but at that time there were just 150 students in all of CEPT. Now, every year we admit 280 students in the first year in the undergraduate programs alone. And we graduate 500 people every year. So we are a big school now. So that's one big change you will notice that has taken place over the years that you will see. Over the last, the CEPT has finished. CEPT started off with the School of Architecture. So the beginning of CEPT may be considered to be the starting of the School of Architecture in 1962. And in 2012, 50 years got completed. And in 2012, the board of CEPT University mandated a sort of a comprehensive look at the whole university, seeing how it is functioning, how it is structured, what it has, and said, please do whatever is necessary. And that was a mandate to all of the people at CEPT, that you have to do whatever is necessary to transform it and equip it, basically, build on its strengths and sort of equip it to tackle the next 50 years. So there have been a lot of things that have been done in the programs, in the infrastructure, etc., etc. Many of you are coming after a long time, will get to see it. I'm hopeful that some of the things you see, like the new library or the new canteen or the new workshop, which is right next door, you find good. There's lots more building to be done, not just in the buildings, but also in the programs and what we are doing. We are very much on that journey. And I'd like to say that alums are very much a part of that endeavor. No university functions well unless it builds great engagements with its alums. And we've recently set up an alumni office. You might have seen their desks outside, if I'm not mistaken. Please, if you haven't registered, please register with them. You will get periodic updates of what's happening, the newsletter, what's happening at the university. Please feel free to write to them. They will be supportive in organizing visits, giving you information, whatever else that you need. There is a full-fledged 4-people alum office that has been set up just a few months ago, and you will find that there is a place to connect with. If you have suggestions, if you have comments to make about what we are doing, please feel free, write to them or write to me directly or to Deepa ma'am, right? With that said, let me welcome you once again and say, I'm sure, when old friends get together, I can just imagine, I wish this was my reunion, when old friends get together, it's a time when you have a lot of fun and it's old memories and all of the world seems nice and good because you were going back in time to a time when life had many possibilities to offer, and we were all, well, at least some of us were young, and so that is fantastic. So have a lot of fun, and I wish you all the very best. And of course, the program and Deepa and everybody have my fullest support in everything that they need to keep this program going and make it get even better and better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deepa ma'am, and we are very grateful for Dr. Bimal Patel and Professor Surya Kakani for sharing a few words with us and unraveling our entire timeline, and we're indeed happy to have come so far. I would request our Deepa ma'am to give a memento to Dr. Bimal Patel and Professor Surya Kakani. Thank you so much, Deepa ma'am and Riddhi. I would request Deepa ma'am to now give a brief introduction to the sessions for the event, which will guide us through these 2 days.
Thank you, Dr. Bimal and Professor Surya, for setting up the momentum. I would like to start by remembering Professor Bhagwat. Sir was always there for being our teacher, our inspiration, our mentor, and whatnot. It would not be an understatement to say that this program is what it is because of him. Though physically he is not amongst us, but his teachings imbibed by many of us are now percolating within the next generation. Today we remember him for his love and knowledge of plants. We used to call him a walking encyclopedia of plants and learned a lot from him during our site visits. Sir was always a great visionary. In 1992, he approached Dr. Vakil, the then director of CEPT, and proposed to start the program. The stage was all set to commence in July 1993, as we just heard about the timeline. And the seed of this program was sown by him and then nurtured later also by him. This caricature is done by one of our alumni, Mahapoj Ali, showing sir. It has been 25 years since then, a long time. 23 batches have graduated, and with 307 alumni out in the field. So this is one poster we have pasted outside also. I think you can find yourself in this. Before going further, I would like to thank few of those special people without whom this event would not have been possible. And I would like them to come on stage, please. Beena, Tapan, please come. Divya, Priyesh, Anjali, Sandeep and Bobby. Come. Anjali, please come. Okay. Okay. They have worked relentlessly and dedicatedly. I think the other 4 people are not here. They are outside. They are still working. It's so satisfying to see them here for being my students, and now they are my colleagues. Thank you all to make this event a great success. Thank you. Please take your seat. I would also like to thank the students and the staff from offices of Bobby and Sandeep who have volunteered to work for this event. Moving on, for the past 1 month, my colleagues and I have been working towards making this special for you all. During these 2 days, we have put up 2 exhibitions. One that you see here is the alumni work, all around that is pinned up. There are more than 100 sheets sent by 60 alumni. I request everyone to have a round of the same at your convenience. Another exhibition is pinned up in Sagra basement. So this is the alumni exhibition, this is pinned up here. Another one is pinned up in Sagra basement. My colleagues Divya and Anjali shall explain you a little bit more about that exhibition after this. And then we also have, this is the exhibition in Sagra basement. And we have some photographic memories also pinned up there. Besides that, we shall be having 3 talks today. One by Mr. Mohan Rao, Dr. Ketan Tatu, and Prachi Wakle. Tomorrow we shall have a presentation of the journey of these 25 years, followed by alumni presenting their works. Apart from this, we have also planned a series of lectures throughout the year by our alumni and other professionals. Till date, we had 2 of such lectures. One was by 4 of our faculty members, 3 of whom were alumni, and this was attended by the students. And then there was a second lecture by a French landscape architect just last week. We had also floated this idea of lectures and presentations to many of you as well, and some of you had reverted and shown interest to be a part of it. I take this opportunity to request you all to participate, and do let us know in advance if you happen to be in Ahmedabad. We can plan out a lecture for you people, and you can share your experiences with the students here. I would now like to invite Divya and Anjali to share some details about the second exhibition.
So this is the academic works exhibition, and it has 3 sections. One is called as off landscapes. It has representational work across subjects taught in the subject in the program, and it is classified basically under the fundamentals which we always refer to: groundwater, forest, and culture. So I have put some sample works of how we have classified and put together this. For example, it has a range of works, precisely 10 sheets each category, which ranges from a micro scale to probably a subcontinental scale. So you can see the variations here. So this is responding to ground, water, plants, forest, trees, and culture. And the second part of exhibition, it is called as locus because it has 2 parts. One, it is located the 305 thesis, which is done all across the country. So it is covered this much. And also we have classified the kind of thesis we do under certain themes, and we have put up representational works. So this one represents land. This is Devyani Deshmukh's work. And the third exhibition, Anjali will be talking.
This is the third exhibition. It's called Correlate. This is actually a compilation of the academic work of all the batches. So what we have done is we are really trying to look at all the work that each batch has done, and we are choosing work from that and making a compilation. So this is the first batch, 1993, with the 4 students. More of that. Then this is 2001, 2009, and this is 2015, which is the last batch that has graduated. We would also like to take this opportunity to call for work, because we don't have a lot of the academic work of the initial years. So 93 to 2000, we have all the theses which are there in the library, and some hard copies of the regional studies that are there. So if all of you can share your work of that time, if you still have it, that will be great, because that is one part that we are really falling short in terms of the content of the work that we have. This is an ongoing exhibition. This will get over. We are planning to finish this by July or August. So right now we have compiled about the works of 7 batches, not all 23. So all suggestions and feedback are also welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa ma'am, Anjali ma'am, and Divya ma'am. I hope everyone got a fairly good idea of the schedule and proceedings for this event. We also have a small token that we would like to give Dr. Bimal Patel, and we would ask Deepa ma'am to do the honors for the same. Before we begin day 1 of this most awaited landscape event, I invite our alumni, Ms. Prachi Vakle, to speak a few words about late Professor Bhagwat. Prachi Vakle is a partner at Roots, a landscape design practice based in Pune. She did her bachelor's in architecture from Mumbai University in 2002. She worked as an intern and then as project architect with the firm Landscape Design and Development, led by prominent landscape architect Raju Pradhan, based in Mumbai. Post which she joined the master's program in landscape architecture from CEPT Ahmedabad from 2003 to 2005. To extend her learnings further, in 2015, she pursued a PG diploma in natural resource management and is a member of Ecological Society Pune. Please welcome on dais Ms. Prachi Vakle.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, I was a little shaky some time back. Please excuse me for that. When Sandeep Patil, I didn't say hello to you. I'm sorry. Are you here? Yeah, he's not here. Okay, when Sandeep suggested to reread the retreat essay that I had done 3 years back, here with a few elaborations in a Septian way, he'd written a mail to me. I knew I was getting trapped. The essay is an inquiry into a search for Indianness in landscape. And then it left me wondering, why that essay? Where did it come from? Why me? And so on. All circling down back to this place, right here. So before proceeding on to the essay, I take this opportunity to express what this place and people mean to me. The amazing 2 years spent here about 15 years back were the most intense, wondrous, and cherished moments of my life. And encapsulating all those memories in words would be a challenging task. But still, somebody had to do this, and like a true Septian, I have tried to wave the flag. I assume majority of us are here because we feel belonged. This sense of belonging is not merely because of the campus, but because of the people that have made this event happen. So this one's for my people. To start off, I have a small story to share from my childhood. I really went back in time while starting off. So my father had got me a big doll from Singapore when I was in 5th standard. She was about 2.5 feet, stuffed toy with round specs and curly hair. She wore this orange dungaree and checkered blue shirt. As a child, I was confused what to call her, as I couldn't figure out whether it was a girl or a boy. So my dad suggested, why don't you call her Bobby, as it works for both. So, well, jokes apart, but I had found a friend named Bobby in the 90s and another one in 2003 when I landed in Ahmedabad. Sir was too heavy a term for him, as he was more like a senior. He was like this generic medicine, a friend for all students. When we were bogged down by Aniket sir's incomprehensible jargon, the burden of being in CEPT and, not being able to grasp the expanse of landscape as a subject, Bobby sir was there for our rescue. He was there to make us feel grounded, to say, yes, it's difficult, but you guys have the potential. So, as a mediator to keep us from running away, to nurture our vague creative beliefs into realism, into tangible expressions. Today also he's there to make us all feel connected and welcome. Cheers for him. Now the show. Upon securing admission here, it was my first time in a hostel. So far from a home was a little girl from a cozy nuclear family. After the interview, probably with the comfort of the campus atmosphere, my parents were kind of ready to let me go. You know, either get married or go for education. You take care of yourself. Ab tum tumhara dekh lo types. But this being away from home was big transition. Just boiled down to one change, from O to A. There I had mom, and here we had ma'am. So she didn't have just two; she had a lot of them after that. She has been there, firmly grounded, compassionate, simplifying our lives in all our academic and at times personal upheavals. She has been the mother of the house in the true sense, to make all the tasks feel so easy, to support us morally, emotionally, and practically. She has this amazing ability of acceptance that her strength remains highly understated. Hats off to you, ma'am. By the time I entered in 2003, the department was almost 9 years old, pretty well established. Big thing for us to get admission here. So for us then, Professor Bhagwat was the landscape department, and landscape department was Prabhakar Bhagwat sir. Soon he became Bade sir for us, as we were fortunate to have both Aniket sir and Bade sir together. Bade sir was someone who would never sit idle. At 73, while he was doing relatively passive work in his office, in his own firm, meaning doing planting plans, and we all know how laborious that is, he was thoroughly involved in the department, of course guiding our studios, attending international conferences, managing the school library, and so on. That's when the Section 712 really expanded. Some of the books like Tropical, Bose and Chaudhary, Forestry by G.S. Puri, which he insisted we all bear a copy. Clueless then, we hardly knew that we would be referring to them like a Bible in coming years. Our batch was one of the fortunate lot to have skipped the 2 months training, converted to a 15-day study tour to 3 cities, Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Pune. We got to visit projects, nurseries, gardens, and parks with him. Those untiring walks, meaning we were panting, he was the one who was untiringly walking, was where he introduced us to the world of plants. Trees with identifying characters. It was so easy to register. The big fat lady with a hat on top was Adensonia digitata. He knew his plants so well, he would talk of them fondly like we talk of our friends and people around. He would talk of them with joy. Suddenly, in the month of October, he would come to the studio and say, go and see how beautifully flowering Saptakarni is. Feel the fragrance of neem flowers in the night. And it was right there under our nose, before the champas in the parking. Totally subsided by the fragrance of champas. So I would love to listen to him on the man and environment classes. These are stories that came from heart. For a non-reader like me, they were a treat to the ears, a culmination of his extensive readings over the years. One can't get such a summarized, easy-to-comprehend version of history from a landscape architect's perspective in a single book. He was a teacher by blood and bone, also a taskmaster who had the vision. He would vehemently insist upon regional theses. Students, some hesitantly, some frustratedly, some unconvincingly, but almost all did environmental planning theses. I too had my own share of moral fights with him, and personally, due to which today I truly value the perspective he gave me immeasurably. It took time for us to realize his larger concerns for the status of environment in the country, but I assume he was just relentlessly sowing the seeds. Prior to CEPT, as few of you all might be aware, Professor Bhagwat was also the founder HOD of Landscape Department at SPA Delhi in 70s. He had served as a landscape faculty at reputed institutes like JJ and NID, after which he founded this course. Surprisingly, he had also mobilized the first course in landscape in 1955, somewhere during, in IIT Kharagpur. Having devoted more than 50 years in academics and fondly called as Bapu by our seniors, I think he not just pioneered, but rightfully tread the path of landscape education in India. But for a person like him, this was not enough. Looking at the speeding infrastructure growth around, I assume he must have been constantly worried of the status of Indian landscape scenario. There were things going on in his head. And during my second year, that's in 2004, is when ISOLA happened. Upon forming the body, hosting the first ISOLA conference was a big event. It was like an in-house function. It was totally Vadesa's baby. All our juniors, the batch of 2004, were slogging for every aspect to the last detail, guided by Aniket sir. Nonetheless, it was also the first international conference on landscape happening in India. This is the IFLA Eastern Region Conference 2005, hosted in Mumbai. In these years, I also sensed that Badesa's another preoccupation was knowledge and perception of Indian history in landscape, history of landscape. The prevailing one focused on gardens, essentially beginning with Mughal era. He had been constantly trying to gather references from other sources of history, like Sanskrit literature, that would go back in time. He used to often give random references of his readings from different sources during our informal conversations. In fact, many of our students' seminar topics were shaping up in that direction. I assume that both the conferences curated by him in 2005 and 2011, respectively, I've pushed the names, were an endeavor in this direction. He intended to assemble such documentation and generate valid database towards this end. He was probing for authoritative scientific resource material to prove his readings and understandings. My connection with him was not just limited to the academic years spent here, but even later in his busy schedules, it was him who would manage to catch upon us whenever in Mumbai or Pune. To an extent that he himself set up a meeting with a politician in Mumbai and personally accompanied me to discuss my thesis work with him on Powai Lake. In fact, it was him who insisted and facilitated our participation in the IFLA IPR award, which our studio managed to bag in 2008. Guess he believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. Each of us here might have bittersweet memories to recall of him. As often seen in history, walking on an untrodden path is easier said than done, and very few get the deserved appreciation for their deeds. His headstrong, persistent nature and self-determined way of working gave him few believers and followers. But those who could not understand his words, a project like Timber demonstrated that the philosophies he believed in were realistic and achievable. His understandings, learnings, belief, and passion shall culminate and continue to educate us through the works of his numerous students. And a testimony to this is the recent event that happened in Pune, the first ISOLA public lecture series, which invited 5 practices to showcase their work from Maharashtra. I'm proud to say 5 out of 6 are the alma mater of this department. All of them are here, I guess. Are they here? Vandana and Vikas. I'll just name them. Vandana and Vikas Labba, Manjari Mahajan, Sonali Rahotre, Umesh Vakre, and Yogendra Bellai. There is a way. And I'm sure there will be many more of such instances to come. Thus, with Professor Prabhakar B Bhagwat's contribution to education and profession, I undoubtedly believe that he was a pioneer in laying the foundations of landscape architecture as an independent profession in India. And it would mean no exaggeration to call him the father of Indian landscape. The terms such as mentor, torchbearer, guide, philosopher were lesser known to me earlier. But today, standing on this dais, I miss my guru the most. It's difficult to accept that there aren't going to be any more Tuesdays that I will have with my Mori, and words shall fall short to express what he meant for me. But I believe the following poem by Tagore shall help do justice. I woke and found his letter with the morning. I do not know what it says, for I cannot read. Let me hold it to my forehead and press it to my heart. When the night grows still and stars come out one by one, I'll spread it on my lap and stay silent. The rustling leaves will read it aloud to me. The rushing stream will chant it, and 7 white stars will sing it to me from the sky. I cannot find what I seek. I cannot understand what I would learn. But this unread letter has lightened my burdens and turned my thoughts into songs. Thank you. with due consideration for your patience, I'll be doing the talk on the landscape understandings in after Mohan first. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vakle. I'm sure everyone who knew Professor Bhagwat would reminisce at this point, and it was a lovely journey through those memories. Moving further, today's session is about imagining landscape futures. We will be having a series of talks which shall shed some light on this topic. Our first speaker will be Mr. Mohan Rao, who will be giving us a presentation titled Language of Landscape, followed by Dr. Ketan Tatu, and finally we will have our own alumni, Ms. Vakle, taking us through her talk, which is titled Indianness in Landscape. So our first speaker of the day is Mr. Mohan Rao, who heads Integrated Design INDE, a research-based practice engaged in environmental design, regional planning, and landscape architecture, with a strong focus on sustainable practices. The firm's area of engagement include biodiversity and ecosystem services, climate change and passive design, low-impact development, and traditional knowledge systems. Research and practice initiatives of the firm are spread across India, China, Africa, Europe, and Latin America. Honors include several awards instituted by UNESCO, IFLA, HUDCO, etc. Please welcome on stage Mr. Mohan Rao.
Thanks, Rushika. And thank you, Surya, Deepa, and colleagues for having me over. I'm feeling a little bit like the proverbial Indian bride who's sent off to the husband's house where she doesn't know anybody. So I'm this one outsider in this huge family of CEPT. But like I was telling Surya earlier, I think I know more people in the audience than many of the alumni here, because I know a long range of people who've been colleagues, students, clients, a whole range of people. So I'm very, very happy to be here. So it's quite a coincidence that this 25-year journey that we want to not only reminisce about in a nice way, but also use it as a time for evaluation, for critical evaluation, as well as to use it as a way to chart the way forward. It's by the way, I also am 25 years old in the profession, not in real life, but it's been the same journey. So hopefully some of the learnings and critical thinking from here, I should be able to reflect back on my own. So very quickly, what we're doing is, this is not a project-based presentation on landscape or landscape architecture, but I'm looking at this as an opportunity for us to be able to raise larger questions. So even though Sandeep has warned me that I have no more than 1 hour, don't worry, I won't be speaking for 1 hour. I would really see if, depending on how the program is structured, if it has to become interactive and iterative, it will be great, because otherwise I will take back nothing from here. So the idea is to be able to not only look at the journey of landscape as a language, as a way of looking at nature, or man's interaction with nature or reaction to natural forces. So it has spanned a long journey, recorded history of, depending on which historian you believe, can be anywhere between 5 to 11,000 years. Initially looked at as an ideal, as a supernatural, spiritual background where entire landscapes become sacred. Well before the idea of spatial marking was known in architectural terms, it was the landscape that was defining territories and identities, and more from the spiritual cultural angle than from many things that came up later. The expressions vary across cultures, across geographies, across climates, and it also gets more and more finer, abstracted, different kinds of articulation in different cultures, and it transcends then into, from being spiritual and the sacred, to the more utilitarian, the more mundane, where you use it to service mankind, if you can use the term, as irrigation systems, as agroeconomic systems, and so on, till we come to the more visually striking ones. I mean, typically this is what defines landscape for most people, hopefully not only in the audience, but even outside, where it symbolizes all the struggles of the previous millennia that man had with nature, and finally declared a victory over those forces, where you could shape them as you will. It was not enough that you were shaping buildings or landforms, but every single natural element that you could think of, including the vegetation or the way the water flowed, or irrespective of the symbolism that went behind many of these things, it still symbolized the ultimate victory of man over nature at that point in time. So I'm not being critical of any of these viewpoints, but it's important to understand this journey to see where we have come from before we know which direction to head towards. In the recent past, especially with the Rachel Carson-led environmental movements in the US, becoming more mainstream as we went along, starting in the 70s and 80s, when the negative forces of industrialization really hit humanity, where landscape was started to be seen more as remedial, that there is a certain branch of humanity that is causing all this, sometimes needless, sometimes as a necessary evil, damage to the earth systems. And then landscape was then seen as this one mediator between the development aspirations of man on one side and the ecological needs of the planetary system on the other. So most of these were not guiding principles when they were being done. They were more seen as remedial systems to actually offset the damage that has already been done or would be done in the near future. So whether it was small urban sites or large scars of the earth, such as mines, it was the same. And in some of the few lucky cases, they were also able to use it as a future projection to say these are the kinds of damages that is likely to happen. This particular case, we are looking at urban transport systems and land use patterns, where landscape then is seen not only as a remedial but also as a mitigator. So even before you create the problem, how do you then position landscape in a way that it actually absorbs all the negative, at least some of the negative forces that would come out of this. This has, of course, taken many different forms. Some of them are intensely visual, artistic installations. Some are highly ecological across very large geographies, including multiple systems. So if this has been the journey, what next? What are the possible ways in which it can be taken forward? So you could continue to have many different responses of landscape as a profession. I don't necessarily mean it in a limited way, but in the most general and generous definition possible. As would it remain as a response, as a reaction to what is happening on the outside, whether it's industrialization, urbanization, development needs, liberalization, neo-capitalism? You can take any angle that you want here. Would it remain as a reactive thing? Should it be a more studied response to future challenges, a little more nuanced, moving beyond human society, moving beyond the visual and the built? So what are those possible future challenges? And I'm not known for being a very optimistic person, so you won't see very many happy pictures here. So these are some of the elephants in the room. Some of us already recognize, some of us are blind to, some of us think it's a rope and a snake and a trunk and something else, not recognizing the elephant. But these are real challenges, not so far away. When these were seen as future challenges, when they were first posted, The people who posted them were very happy because they would all be dead and gone when it happened. But for most people in this room, that would not be the case. You would be there dealing with this in 5, 10, 20 years. Many of this is already very apparent in many parts of the world. Whether we are talking about climate change, whether we are talking of carbon levels, these are not simply industrial numerical challenges to be met with on an Excel sheet. These are real everyday challenges that need to be reflected in every aspect of every thinking person. Right now we are talking of landscape and environment as a profession, of course, so we would put that in the forefront. If an economist were talking about this, he or she would also be using the same language but coming from a different perspective. Increasing soil aridity, increasing precipitation, increasing intense weather events, sea level rises. But the point is, for each of these things, there is already a counterpoint that always exists. There is the mainstream industrial counterpoint. Many of you are thankfully very young to know the big tobacco argument that went on in the 70s and 80s. Till about late 70s, the tobacco industry employed consistently some of the best scientists and universities in the world to say that tobacco causes no harm to humanity. So every time a doctor would say this is wrong, there would be this team of scientists saying, oh, you don't know nothing, here is all the evidence. That's exactly what is happening in all these sciences that we are talking about. For every single thinking liberal, quote unquote, who says there is climate change and sea level rise, there will be 50 qualified experts from their own fields who are proving that wrong. Now, here the question is not about winning a verbal war or an argument. There are no prizes for losers in this case or for the winners. Everybody loses. The reality still exists to be the same, except that the vulnerabilities change. There are those that are intensely more vulnerable to this, who would be more affected, who would be impacted more immediately and more severely. There are those who can push that change a little longer, a little farther. But that's about it, because you're really talking about a planetary system and not specifically a danger to a particular site or a city. Extreme weather events are no longer a surprise. 9 out of the 10 worst weather years in the last century have been in the last 10 years across the globe. Cities which you cannot even the most moronic person cannot imagine why Jodhpur should flood. It's in the desert, right? By definition, there is no rain. How can it flood? But these are the very definitions of what we call extreme events. So on the contrary, and this is something that you will come up with constantly, somebody will show up 100-year data and say, look, there has been no climate change. It's the same. But we cannot live life on statistics. There are everyday challenges that happen. The numbers may add up into a zero-sum game at the end, but it is the intensity that matters. All the cities that we are discussing, Delhi, Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, all these, if you look at the annual average, the rainfall remains the same. But instead of spread over 54 days, now you get that rainfall in 3 days. How do you manage? So then this is no longer an urban infrastructure problem, but something that needs to be addressed at the very core of development itself. And this extends to everything that our profession touches upon. Not just soil and water as intangible components of nature, but something that supports our very, very life on the planet. So if like I said, I'm sorry for all the depressing news. I can't think of any happy news at the moment. But this is a scenario that we need to be addressing. And if it was really happy, we didn't need to be addressing anything, right? There is a real problem. It is only going to get worse. And what kind of a language would then be developed? Would it still remain symbolic and abstract? Would it remain very visual? Would it remain project-based, identity-based, as we have been seeing across the globe? And it's increasingly so in the last 10 years in India. would it mean a much more engineered landscape? This is becoming a very, very serious conversation in the profession about not only putting tangible numbers on what you do, but also engineering the systems. It's no longer enough to believe that the soil can percolate so much water. You don't believe soil, so you're going to tell the soil how much you should percolate, which means you actually put engineered systems in place to do that. We also have lots and lots of protocols and numbers to help us do this. Many of the standards that you do, I'm not particularly for or against any of these standards, I'm just using them as an example. Whether you look at IGBC, LEED, GRIHA, BEE, any of the standards that deal anywhere with the built environment, everything boils down to some kind of numbers, some kind of guidelines. Because the underlying assumption is that all of us are morons, we don't know our job, and unless we are given a checklist and a laundry list of what is to be done, we don't know what to do. Unfortunately, that is true for many ways in how projects are executed. So you actually get a long list of things, which is literally like a laundry list, and then they decide whether you get the gold, platinum, silver, whatever color medals that you want. Or should it continue to remain and continue to explore very limited immediate surroundings as it has been doing for the last 30, 40 years. We may be able to achieve many, many good things on small sites, but are they enough? Do they go far enough to address many of the issues that we are talking about? So, the particularly provocative way I'm using the aggressor is that nature and natural systems have been the recipient for the last 10,000 years for whatever man has done, whether it's irrigation system to whole-scale changes of landscape. From being a respondent, what if then it becomes the aggressor? So when I'm using the aggressor, I'm actually using it as a positive thing here. If you were to, many of us have traveled to different parts of India, I hope. And you're also aware that every 200-300 kilometers you travel, it's an entirely new landscape, entirely new soil, culture, food. But if you were to believe any of the standards that any of the technical agencies have drawn up in the country, it will tell you that just like they would teach you in the 5th or 6th standard textbook, that India has 5 zones, right? So you could be here in Jaisalmer, you could be here, what is this, Sholapur? You're basically in the same zone, right? You could be here in Mughal Sarai, you could be in Madurai, you could be in Goa. You're all in the same zone. And why is this important? I mean, it's funny, we can laugh about it. All the subsequent standards of performance are drawn up based on this kind of a map by every single agency, which means you're flattening that performance to a level where it becomes very, very easy for the bureaucrat and the manager to manage. To say, I have these 5 points, you're in these states, follow these 4 things. You're, across from Hoshiarpur to, I don't know, this is, I can't even, it's beyond funny to say that all these are in the same zone. But what this does is that it lets us get off easily. Because then what I can do is, look, this is the standard, these are the 18 things you want me to do, and this is done and over with, right? I am being a gentleman, I am being a law-abiding citizen, I don't have to do anything else about it. This is something that was created as a response to this. This was an in-house research thing, but we were trying to advise some of these agencies where we only took, I think, 18 criteria. And I say 18 criteria because when you're talking of biogeoregions, it's a ridiculously small number. You would need to use anywhere between 70 to 80 layers, right from topography and soil to rainfall to many, many other things. Just those 18 layers gave us 20 variations across the country. Sure, this makes the manager's job difficult, but the idea here is not to make his life easier. The idea is to do the right response to the ground condition. And if we have to start looking at any region, I think we should all stop looking at what is prescribed. It doesn't matter who that agency is. If I am working in a particular region in Bundelkhand here, it is my job then to understand what that biogeoregion is by using whatever layers we think is appropriate. Again, these layers can be very, very different depending on the kind of intervention and our point of entry. Dependency on resources will become an increasingly violent challenge. And we have seen examples of this across the country. My own states with fight with Tamil Nadu makes newspaper coverage all the time. Karnataka and Tamil Nadu are always fighting over river water and who it belongs to. And this is at the state level. This fight is going to continue. You already see many, many conflicts, for example, in Haryana. And these are states I know and I work with, so I'm giving those examples. In Rajasthan, in Uttarakhand, where panchayat level fights have started about upstream and downstream rights, right? Because the more scarce that resource gets, obviously it's not only about sense of entitlement, it's a question of survival. How far can we extend our ecological footprint, be it a city, be it an industry? It's not that we need to go back and live on the trees and give up all modern comforts. Cities like Vijayanagara have demonstrated it extensively, how at that point in time this was the most densely built capital in the world, which was completely independent of all resource dependency, including water, food, livelihood, everything. Which means that you need to start reimagining how you look at settlements, how you look at natural topography. This can also be done in extremely challenging situations. It's not like these only work in large scenic areas where we have forests and rivers flowing. This can also work in, whether it works in Chitradurga in Karnataka, in Chittorgarh in Rajasthan, they all work on the same principle of extremely closed loop management of resources, which means the lesser your dependency on an external factor, the greater your resilience to external change. Now, learnings from that can also then be brought back to what we call land capacity based planning. Land capacity understood at the site level as demonstrated by the Makagian layers and so on, but it gets increasingly more complex when you put it in contemporary urban development frameworks, because you need to not only look at land and land development, you're looking at economic and social equity, you're looking at mobility and transportation networks, and it's possible to actually draw these, and they have been practically done in many, many regions of the world, including in India, where the capacity of the land based on water, watersheds, topography actually become the primary determinant for planning. Unlike the remedial systems we were talking about earlier, where these systems are used to correct a past mistake, these then are actually used to determine the future growth patterns for settlements. The same can be taken down from the larger city to the neighborhood to a cluster level, not only for resource dependency for utilization and extraction, but also for decentralized performance. For example, waste management. why should all of Pune's waste be taken to one landfill 20 kilometers away and managed? Why should sewage pumping stations like we see across the river, where we lay complex pipelines to reach one STP? So the more engineered and the more centralized these systems get, the more vulnerable they get, which means any kind of impact, whether it is on an energy failure or an engineering failure, means it impacts large populations. So how decentralized can it get? From food to livelihood to waste management to water provision, any and every one of these ecosystem services can be done at very, very small levels. It can be used to address even in extreme climates. This is, for example, a project in the northern Sahara in Morocco, where an entire development was proven and built and successfully shown to be completely resource neutral. This is very different from the Masdar city kind of resource neutrality we are talking about here. That, by the way, was sarcasm. But what we are talking about is really working with the topography and the natural capacity of the land in a way that you can sustain large populations without curtailing the development needs. There are lots of tools available. I think what was interesting when I was seeing the exhibition and what was shown also on the slide was our drawings are getting increasingly sexy, and we get so seduced by our own drawings, we don't need to do anything further, right? We are so happy doing it. But the essential thinking cannot change. What was drawn on a butter sheet in 1993 still has the same thinking that has gone in 2015. The way it is presented changes. Having said that, there are a lot of algorithmic tools that are available which were not available earlier. What this means is that unlike what clients imagine that, oh, you have a computer, you can do it fast. No, it doesn't work like that. I can only print it out faster for you, but the amount of thinking still remains the same. I can print out many more variations for you, but I cannot change the way the land behaves. I can also model it for different purposes, which means that unlike an earlier time where I would have 2 or 3 ways in which to present or analyze the land, now I may have multiple ways to do it using multiple parameters. Again, depends on your entry point. There is no one correct way to do this or one real way to do it. One of the things that I have been very interested in working on for some time now is to take it down to its very, very basic levels. And some amount of reading and research has led me to believe that these will be the 4 determinants of life on the planet in 100 years' time. Water and carbon has been enough in the conversation for the last many years, so I don't need to elaborate on that. But nitrogen, at least people who study plants and taxonomy and soil mechanics know how important this is. But increasingly phosphorus, the non-availability of it, because this is one of the few elements that is non-renewable, even more so than petroleum or diamonds or anything else. It's also extremely difficult to extract it back from the waste once it washes off. And that essentially determines whether we'll be able to grow food on the planet or not. Which is why all the fertilizers that you see have this NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which are all industrially produced. To produce that phosphorus, again, you need to dig into more fossil fuels. So it's one vicious circle which is waiting to break the day we run out of oil. But all of that is already in nature, just locked away or mismanaged. And how will this impact the way we think about design? Whether we are talking about decentralization, closed resource loops, in many different ways. They may not always be expressed as a physical parameter. It is not simply about engineering the design, but it's actually about de-engineering the existing design systems. And especially so in the Indian context, all these things that we talked about, whether it is about climate change on one side, to spiritual understandings of the land, to cultural nuances, to food productivity, to livelihood, they all kind of come together in one chaotic whole. It's not very easy to read them as separate layers. So, especially those of us who will be engaged in larger and larger projects. So the attractiveness of larger projects is not that we can use a bigger sheet and make bigger drawings. That used to be the case when we were students. But the idea is that anything that you do there has that much larger impact. And equally so is the impact of the larger site on the project itself. This, for example, is the Kaveri Delta on the east coast in Tamil Nadu, and how much of the surrounding countryside, when we are saying surrounding countryside, we are talking of a 200-kilometer grid. How much of that gets expressed in the site? Not merely as a graphic, but as a real ecological layer. How will it flow through the site in a way that you're almost seeing it as a seamless transition from the inside to the outside. So I have an interesting side point. This was one of the sites that was used by, okay, I'm not a nice person, I'll even name them, Terry Griha people as a pilot project to understand large-scale developments, because till that time they only had building ratings. They had nothing to do with campus or landscape. So then they came with this laundry list of 84 things I had to do, which was rainwater harvesting, topsoil conservation, all the things. So I sent back the list to them that out of these 84, 83 are not possible on the site, because there is no topsoil. This is the delta. It has a 4-meter layer of clay. I cannot do rainwater harvesting because the water table is at 5 centimeters. I don't even need to dig. I need to just trip on the land and there is water, right? But all of this was thrown away and the project was rejected for not meeting the standards. Yeah. No, the point here is that this was one place where we could have a conversation. Imagine the many number of situations where these conversations don't happen and the incredible amount of damage that is being done to the environment in the name of standardization. And it's the same set of laws that now traps all the water from the flyovers in Delhi and puts it into the aquifer, including the flow of the hydrocarbons and the petroleum from the road, and you're injecting it right into the aquifer, never to be cleaned. But this is seen as a good practice. Not my phone, no? No. So, like the earlier point I was making, it's also extremely difficult for us to be talking about ecology, environment, or any of these issues if we are not addressing livelihood, which is seen as some vague socio-economic problem we shouldn't be concerned with, but rest assured that if you don't solve one, you cannot ever change the other. This particular example has been both very traumatic and very satisfying, because this is about 5 kilometers away from Cherrapunji on the Bangladesh border. It receives 10,500 mm of rainfall, and they also get 30 tankers of water from Shillong, 200 kilometers away, for drinking. So that is the level of mismanagement of large-scale landscape. This is not a problem of one government or one municipality. We are talking of a regional landscape that spreads across borders, and it is just devastating the whole place. And that actually boils down to livelihood, cropping patterns, which if we did not recognize, we would continue to go with solutions like contour trenching as if that would save the world, but it doesn't. resilience, urban flooding, and when we're talking of landscape as an infrastructure, not necessarily as a built infrastructure, but landscape recognized for the ecosystem services that it can potentially provide. What can be provided by a built dike and a series of embankments and sluice wells can easily be done by a vegetated bank, and not only much more efficiently, but offering a lot more resilience in the process. And increasingly, this seems to be the only way forward for urban India. I cannot think of a single state or a single city that has not been flooded in the last 5 years. The intensity would vary. In some cases, we have loss of life, so it makes the papers. In some cases, it just stays for a few hours and goes away. But it is only going to increase in intensity and its impact and devastation in the years. And one way, and the only way actually that can be dealt with, is with systems that are highly resilient and reactive to the process. It needs to be dynamic enough. They cannot become over-engineered stormwater drains that would otherwise collapse. Chennai is a classic example of this move away from de-engineered to engineered systems, which caused all the floods in the last 2 years. So we don't win too many brownie points if we show this outside of our community, right? So, but if you're talking to a bureaucrat or a businessman or an economist, you need to convert this into a readable language. So this was actually, I mean, for me, I saw this as a failure on my part, but this was the only thing that worked. The other reason it worked is this was for the city of Surat, and they could only understand money. But other than that, whatever system designs that were done, while it was proven to be working, could not be translated onto the ground till we were able to put numbers and say, look, if you built a stormwater drain, it costs you X, to maintain it costs you Y, so this is your total. If you did this other system, this is the total. So when they actually start totaling conventional and non-conventional numbers, and they see that there is a 50-100% difference, so most of the time our ego doesn't allow us to do this, right? It's like, I'm telling you, just believe me and do it. But that doesn't work in real life. So you will need to convert it, whether it as money usually, but there can be other parameters also to do the same. In many cases, the same argument of looking at passive design systems for performance can also be extended as passive design of natural dimensions as planning units. Natural dimensions can vary depending on your definition. It can be a migration corridor, it can be a watershed unit, it can be many, many different things. And they actually then become the planning units themselves, rather than doing a prefabricated design, putting it on the site, and then doing remedial action over that. In some of the cases, the layers are even more complex. It's not enough to look at just natural systems or soils or biodiversity or anything. It also has to look at centuries of traditional knowledge that already exists in a place. Many times we don't have the luxury of intervening in a short span of time without being able to understand its long-term impacts. There's only so much modeling that can be done. So in those cases, traditional knowledge systems become very, very invaluable, because whatever mistakes were to be made, somebody already made them 100 years ago, 500 years ago. People have already learned from there and moved on. And then it's much easier to draw from that. And of course, there are scales that are beyond anybody's control. Extreme events, natural disasters, be it like the earthquake in Bhuj or the tsunami in Nicobar, needs a very, very different kind of response. Again, working here in Nicobar meant not so much of construction of material, but of course, the traditional response was, of course, we'll send prefab houses from Sweden and somewhere else and solve the problem. but it actually becomes a long-term rehabilitation. The corals are destroyed, there is no approach to the island, biodiversity is gone. How do you revive the ecology in such a way that there is a sustained livelihood over a period of time? So it's not so much the physical rehabilitation, but the systemic rehabilitation that becomes important. And sometimes we have to look at non-humans just to be nice. But the learnings are very important here, because one of the things about looking at the future path is that it's important to move away from this extremely limited anthropocentric view that has formed all our thinking, and that has only been to our detriment. We can argue all we want about how much more liberal we are and humanitarian we are, but essentially whatever has been invented and developed is still exclusively to serve human needs. So the idea here is not to say that wild animals become more important, then you get into one big argument about who's more important. But the idea is that there is a succession, there is a certain idea of keystone species, and if you do not recognize that and make sure that your systems address not just human uses, but all systems uses, and hence ensuring both reliability of the system and reducing the vulnerability. This can get integrated as food in several cases, including in Gujarat, which we are doing with Sandeep Virmani, at very, very small levels. This is informal settlements of a few acres, but the structuring system for the informal settlements then become determined by the food security that is afforded, not so much by about how much football grounds that we create, but about how much of fodder is created for the cattle and how much of vegetables are grown for the humans. It can be done in very, very small cases. It's because it's not a linear thing that you need to start from one end and go to the other. It needs to be seen as both lateral and networked. What you do at the larger scale and the smaller scale impact each other. In the smaller scale, of course, the satisfaction of being able to see the changes very fast. The seasons here were, I think the two photographs are like 2 months apart between the time of development or management of the land to what we see later. But these become very important because these are powerful demonstrators of what is possible, rather than simply talking on about the potential that is available. So one of the nicer things that has happened with all the flooding and damage in cities is a lot of corporates are very, very scared, right? Everybody wants to move their businesses to India, but they don't know if they will survive. So increasingly, and this is not an isolated case, there have been a huge flurry of risk assessment that needs to be done before a project is undertaken. Earlier risk assessments would be purely economic from business angle, or it would be from the real estate perspective. Now for the same group, which we have done, let's say across 6 cities, in 4 cities, they actually abandoned the project. Okay, I didn't go back because the developer would kill me, but in all the cases, we proved that you would actually be sitting under 4 meters of water in 3 years' time. Now, that's a risk you cannot take, right? Even if it is a 1 in 100 chance, you cannot kill 30,000 of your employees because the real estate is valuable. And the more grounded ones which happen, it doesn't necessarily have to be extremely urban or large scale. Some of the most powerful changers of thinking that we have seen is when it actually works through the culture of the place as a determinant. It could be the temple in the case of Jharkhand, the Meghalaya one I mentioned, it being worked through the church and the pastors. These are forces that you cannot underestimate. How much ever the technical power that you bring to the table, unless you're actually able to tap into the cultural sensibilities in both positive and negative ways. And that can make a huge, huge difference from two perspectives. One, from the traditional knowledge that you can actually bring to the table by recognizing this, but also in terms of being able to respond in sensitive enough ways to the site. There are also, I don't have the full documentation. I don't have your team here to do the documentation for me back there. But some of the interesting interventions that we're doing in some villages is to look at very, very small catalysts of landscape change. Those catalysts can be for crop management, for soil conservation, for any other thing that happens, but presented as a visual spatial project. Because if you were to say this is a lab, they have seen enough labs of the Agriculture University, nobody wants to go there. But when you actually bring in ideas of livelihood, traditional knowledge system, and sustainable development, food security, and many things, the demonstration becomes that much more powerful. The problems that one is familiar with, many of us deal with it at very different levels, whether it's flooding on one side or the urban heat island. These no longer are just notional things that need to be addressed to say I'll plant trees and urban heat island will go away. They need to be addressed in very, very active ways to be able to demonstrate a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year cycle to say, if I do nothing, this would be the rate of change. If I do business as usual, this would be the rate of change. And if I were to actively intervene, this is what would happen. So I am a strong believer in learning from the past, not because I want to turn back the clock, but simply because whoever built whatever, good or bad, this is not a judgment. They had two luxuries that we do not have today. One is of time, right? They did not have to see an entire embankment for a river completed under one administration. It could last 4 generations, it didn't matter. What this did was that if they were foolish enough to build that in the wrong place, it would get wiped out the next year, right? So they didn't have to build stronger and stronger concrete walls to prove themselves right. So they would eventually learn that the river wants to move this way and build accordingly. And the second one, which is a learning which is pretty useless in our world, is the idea of greed, where I want to see this change in X amount, in so much percentage, was not something that drove those things. But if we were to take a part of this wisdom, which is to be able to work with natural forces, whether you give it a cultural, religious, social association, or otherwise, it really doesn't matter, and use that as a framework for sustained development. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mohan sir. That was a very thought-provoking and inspiring talk. And we hope that all of us can take back something from this with us today. I have always revered Mohan sir and his discussions as they are truly inspirational. So much so that it may be the reason why I took up this course and I am here today. So thank you so much, sir, for being such a wonderful mentor. I don't think I can say it enough. And my short stint at India literally broadened my horizons. I would like to call upon Deepa ma'am for honoring our speaker with a memento. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Deepa ma'am. Thank you, Riddhi. Though through the course of these 2 days, ma'am, we would be calling you on the dais way more often. Our next speaker is Dr. Ketan Tatu. Dr. Ketan Tatu is the Director, Foundation for Ecological Welfare, FEW, Ahmedabad. He has served as the Senior Scientist of Gujarat Ecological Education and Research Foundation, the GEER Foundation, for almost a decade. I would request everyone to maintain some silence at this point. He has professional research experience of over 20 years in the field of ecology and biodiversity. Though his main thrust areas of research include wetlands and waterbird ecology, he has been leading research for saline desert, wetlands, forest and grasslands ecosystems of Gujarat. Dr. Ketan Tatu has earned a PhD in environmental science from Gujarat University by conducting remote sensing-based research at Space Applications Centre SAC on Gujarat's only Ramsar site, Nal Sarovar. He has also earned a PhD in Forest Resources Science from West Virginia University, USA, by conducting research on assessment of impacts of herbivory by mute swans on submerged aquatic vegetation in the Chesapeake Bay, USA. He did postdoctoral research at West Virginia University and Virginia Tech University for a short duration. Dr. Ketan Tatu was nominated as a member of the State Wetland Authority of Gujarat State that was formed in May 2017. He has published many papers and ecological articles in reputed journals like the Journal of Bombay Natural History Society India, Waterbirds USA, Indian Journal of Marine Sciences, for examples. A book published by Springer, IN 2017, titled Wetland Science Perspectives from South Asia has 2 chapters by Dr. Tatu. Dr. Ketan Tatu is also the founding editor of a wetland-related e-periodical called Jalaplavit. Mr. Tatu, please join us on stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I thank the organizers of this seminar to invite me here. I'm not an architect, as all of you know, but I was asked to talk something about wetlands and their situation with respect to urban development. So I have tried to do justice to that topic. First of all, is it like this? Change from here. So going forward this way. Okay. Fine. Yep.
That's the pointer. This one is the pointer.
Yep. Thank you. So first of all, I would start from a basic question: what is wetland? Because nowadays people confuse with water bodies and wetlands and everything. You know, water body. The word water body is quite old, and many of you might have heard about that. The word wetland is not that new, but yes, comparatively it is new if we compare it with the term water body. See, for any physical entity to be a water body, there should be a storage of water. Whereas, as far as wetlands are concerned, saturation of land with water is the basic condition. The land may not be covered with water. The land may not be underwater, but it may be just saturated. So that is the main difference as far as I know. Various agencies, you will be amazed to know that only in US there are 10 to 12 different definitions of wetlands. So we should not go in all that complexities. Very, very simple understanding is, as I said, that the land saturated with water is wetland. But if you might have, you might have heard the term Ramsar Convention. So it is a convention under which hundreds of contracting parties of the world, that are the countries, member countries of this convention, they take responsibility to declare internationally important wetlands in their country, and then they try to do wise use of them. So that word wise use is very important. They, on one hand, they have to conserve the wetlands and then do the wise use. What is wise use? The use in such a way that its basic ecological characteristics does not change. For example, if the lake Sambar is a saline water inland lake, so that basic quality should not change. So that is the wise use, broadly, right? So Ramsar Convention is an international treaty to identify and conserve the internationally important wetland in different member countries. That came into existence in 1971, as it is written. Ramsar is the name of a seaside resort, or rather city, in Iran. So this convention was held first time in that city. That's why it is called Ramsar Convention. It defines wetland as areas of marsh, fen, peatland, or water. So actually these are the different types of wetlands only: marsh, fen, peatland. Okay, and then a very broad term is used: water. Areas of marsh, fen, peatland, or water, whether natural, artificial, permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing, fresh, brackish or saline, including the areas of marine water, the depth of which does not exceed 6 meters at low tide. So you can easily understand that it is a very broad level definition, and it has been tried to cover as many wetland as possible under this, by this definition, because originally this convention was called Convention of Wetlands of International Importance as Waterfowl Habitat. So when it came into existence first time, it was more targeted towards conserving wetlands as waterfowl habitat. Waterfowl means water birds. But then they removed that term called waterfowl habitat, and then they made it very general. But because they wanted to cover a lot of water bird habitats, they covered a variety of wetlands, and by using water, they made it very, very broad, you know. So everything is covered, you can say, right? There is another definition by US Fish and Wildlife Service, another agency which is working since many, many years on wetlands in North America. And the previous definition was more concentrated on the habitats, whereas this one is more concentrated on ecological characters. So it says that wetlands are lands transitional between terrestrial and aquatic system, where the water table is usually at or near the surface of the land, or the land is covered with shallow water. Please keep in mind this term, shallow water. If you take Ramsar Convention definition, it includes everything, including dams, which are deep. Whereas here, US Fish and Wildlife Service has given one classification, which is called classification of wetlands and deep water habitats. So they don't cover everything under wetlands, the term wetlands. Deep water habitat means usually more than 2 meter depth. And if you take dams like Sardar Sarovar and Ukai Dam and all that, that would come under deep water habitat, not wetland. But in India, Ramsar Convention definition is highly popular, rather highly in use, I would rather say. So we take everything under the term wetland. Okay. So you might have heard the name of this Nal Sarovar. Okay. It is shown here. How many of you have heard about Nal Sarovar? Yes. So it is the only Ramsar site from Gujarat state. Okay, it is the only Ramsar site. In India, there are 26 Ramsar sites. Ramsar sites means wetlands of international importance from India. There are 26 of them, and this is probably the youngest one. It was declared in 2012, September 2012. It was already a bird sanctuary since 1969. It was already important bird area, I think from 1980s or something like that. But the status of Ramsar site has been gained by this wetland in 2012, and after that there is no other wetland declared as Ramsar site from Gujarat. Rajasthan has multiple Ramsar sites, including Sambar and Kevladev National Park. But unfortunately, in Gujarat there is only one. But again, if you see Maharashtra, there is not a single one. Okay, so Nal Sarovar is a very nice example of wetland. Under a natural condition, it is ideal wetland because it is situated between this permanent aquatic system called Gulf of Cambay and the uplands of Lakhtar and Viramgam and all those talukas, Surendranagar districts and Ahmedabad district. So whatever water comes from upland, it goes through this wetland. Water is stored here, and then excess water flows. There is some, you can see some channel-like thing here. It's an outlet of this wetland, and excess water, if there is heavy rain and if lot of water is accumulated, it goes into Gulf of Cambay. Okay, and here there is a small river called Brahmini River. So lot of water comes from that river, and there is another river here called Bhogavo. Water also comes from there, and rainwater runoff also comes in a diffused manner. So we can't say that water is given only by these two rivers, Brahmini and Bhogavo, but it comes in the form of runoff also. Okay, so this is a transitional entity between truly terrestrial system and truly aquatic system, and that's why it is an wetland in true sense. Even if you apply US Fish and Wildlife Service definition, it should be considered as wetland. Again, they have that definition is big, and it gives two conditions, and if one of them is satisfied, then any land can be considered as wetland. So first condition is the land supports predominantly hydrophytes, at least periodically, not throughout the year, but at least periodically. Okay, so what is hydrophytes? Hydrophytes means nothing but aquatic plants. Okay, and second condition is the substrate of that wetland or the basin of that wetland should be predominantly undrained hydric soil. So this, what is hydric soil? The soil which is frequently ponded, okay, or which is frequently flooded, I would say, easy word. The land which is frequently, or the soil which is frequently flooded, it is called hydric soil, and that hydric soil has a characteristic of having anaerobic microenvironment between the soil particles. So in such soil, only hydrophytes can survive. So these two are rather interconnected. So if any of the two conditions are satisfied, that area can be called wetland as far as US Fish and Wildlife Service definition is concerned. There is another category that is isolated wetlands, and majority of our wetlands 14, and that was also due to rapid urban development in floodplain basin of Jhelum River and encroachment of Dal Lake areas. Another function of the urban and suburban wetland is groundwater recharge or maintenance of groundwater. Okay, if the surface water wetlands are in good condition, they work for the maintenance of groundwater table also. Very important, and my major interest is biodiversity. They are very good pools of biodiversity. They are reservoirs of biodiversity, and especially birds, including migratory birds. They take shelter in many urban and suburban wetlands, especially during winter. You might be knowing that winter season is a season of bird migration in our area. So I will give you some case study also later on. And then because they support birds and all that, not only birds but many other aquatic plants and insects and other wildlife, they are also useful as nature-based recreation. Okay, we in the rush of development we ignore all these things, but as far as I believe, it should not happen, because recreation is a very big part in our life? Recreation or relaxation? Okay. So when it comes to recreation, relaxation, we think very orthodoxly or in very narrow manner, and it is reflected in development, so-called development of many urban wetlands. I would give some examples. Nature education. In Surat, there is a big nature club called Nature Club Surat, and they use one wetland called Gavier Lake in Surat for conservation activities by involving students and other citizens of the country, of that city. Okay, and research for universities. I could not get any Indian example, but in Ohio State University, they have formed Olentangy River Wetland Research Park. There are two kidney-shaped wetlands. Oops. These are two wetlands actually, not a very large area. It's just 20-hectare area, and it is surprisingly, though its area is so small, it is a Ramsar site. And because various research activities are going on there, and one of the stalwarts of wetland research, I think William Miss, who has written the landmark book Wetlands, he's heading that research park and their wetland department. So a lot of continuously wetland related research is going on in this kidney shaped wetlands. So that's why it is very, very important. I would try to run here. I don't know, will it work or not? Can it work offline? Okay. I think it is coming. Can we have voice?
I am a first year master's student with Dr. Sullivan in his aquatic ecology lab, and I'm in the fish and wildlife science specialization. My undergrad is really centered around landscape ecology, understanding the water, wetlands, those sorts of things, and then I was really interested in taking it a step further to the biological aspect in terms of fish and bugs and things like that. The ONCMD Wetland Research Center, it's really great because when you come here, you almost feel like you're not on campus, and that's because it's surrounded by all this natural, you have wetlands, you have the river, and it seems almost like when you're on campus, you're in this urban environment, and you kind of feel detached from the natural environment. And so the Wetland Research Center really allows students who are taking classes here to be connected to their environment. And I know from experience that that is the best way to learn, is to hear something and then be able to see it and touch it and smell it. And so that's why I think it's a really great asset for the university, because it allows us not to sit and lecture, but also experience these things at the same time. You know, people walk by the river and it almost seems like a free resource, but there's so much intrinsic value of these rivers, and we really need to invest in them so that they are higher quality, not only for the life that lives in the river, but also to protect and support higher quality systems for public health.
Okay. In Gujarat, we have this some of the well-known urban wetlands, Kankaria and Chandola in Ahmedabad, Sursagar. See, I have worked mainly in Gujarat, so I'm sorry about that very narrow kind of the scope of my talk. But they are very good examples for entire country. Okay, so there are many urban wetlands which are well known in different cities, including Bhuj in Kutch, Mandvi, Rajkot, Jamnagar, etc. Okay, and what is happening to them? They are facing the problems, general problems that I mentioned earlier. These wetlands are facing in varying amount. Okay, I am not repeating here. Just a visual survey of all these wetlands. Actually, authorities should now focus on Chandola Lake. Okay, because it is neglected since many, many years, and maybe CEPT can also play a role in that and might have already played a role in that. So Chandola should be developed not in a routine manner, but I would say routine plus some ecological manner also. Okay. Gopi Lake in Surat, then Gavier Lake, Surat, Ranmal Lake in Jamnagar, Lakota Lake, both are same. There are two names of the same wetland. Ranmal and Lakota is one entity. And then Hamirsar Lake in Bhuj, two views of that. And Mandvi Lake, again two views. Lalpari Lake in Rajkot. There is Aji Dam in Rajkot, which is also kind of very good reservoir. Okay. So you might have seen in many of these wetlands I have shown birds. Okay, though they are man-made wetlands. And the wetlands like Lakota or Ranmal in Jamnagar, they are amidst the city. And even though they support very high number of birds. Okay. So what are we doing with them? We are doing, this is a view of Chandola. Okay. The upper one. This one is Vishwamitri River, Vadodara. And then we are polluting many of our suburban wetlands. This is a Shahwadi wetland. Actually, this is not a wetland. It's a kind of canal coming from industry, and this water would go in a Shahwadi pond. It is near Narol in South Ahmedabad. So I had carried out a small study there during my student life. So you can see this. The area was dominated by dyeing industry, textile dyeing industry. So that water comes in this kind of canals and go into the that village pond. That is this one is Shahwadi pond. Textile units are here, and water comes from canal and again goes from canal, and there is a vast area of barren land which was earlier rice field area, but because of this continuous pollution now they are converted into open water pools, and they are waterlogged areas. This is a status of that pond now because of pollution. DO was almost zero here, and the dyeing water, the water effluent from dyeing industry used to enter the paddy fields also. Water quality, COD was high, and TDS was very high, and as I said, DO was zero in that Shahwadi pond. Okay, and pH was very high. Okay, highly alkaline. So that created very interesting situation. Alkaline waters are very supportive to blue-green algae growth, the growth of blue-green algae like oscillatoria, then spirulina, etc., which I recorded there, different species, even Pithophora. No, Pithophora is green algae, sorry. But blue-green algae was, I had recorded in blooms. You know, you might have heard the name, the term blooms. So it was a kind of, it was due to alkaline water conditions. And very interestingly, that algae like spirulina is consumed by flamingos. So flamingos used to come in this area. As I mentioned here, hundreds of flamingos belong to both the species. There are two species of flamingos, greater and lesser. The food spectrum of greater flamingo is wider. It feeds on algae, but it also feeds on seeds of some aquatic plants and some animal matter like chironomid larvae. So they were also present, and even lesser flamingo because diatoms were in plenty, and spirulina was also in plenty, which I had recorded there. Apart from flamingos, there were 79 species of birds there. Many of them were aquatic, 44 species, and many of them were migratory also. So this polluted water had created some wetland conditions. So somebody may say that it is a good thing, but I won't say that it is a good thing because we don't know which other toxic substances are present there. Right? So this is a view of that area. So I told about that Shahwadi pond. The water from that pond used to go in this kinds of, previously they were rice fields, now they were behaving like open water pools only. with this alkaline water. So you can see the flamingos, and they also attempted nesting there at that time. This is old data actually, but I'm giving a case study which I had done personally. That's why I'm presenting to you. Okay, this nesting was not successful. It was just kind of, they call it a play mound. They just unintentionally create these kinds of mound which appear like nesting mounds. So my point is that though the alkaline waters or alkaline effluents gave rise to a lot of algal blooms which were good for flamingos, it is not a sure, or it might not be a safe source of food for them, because other toxicants might be present in that. So what is needed is not to be happy that okay, because of this industry this has happened, but we should be more alert, and we should monitor that, the quality of that water very stringently. Okay, sometimes it may not be creating some acute problem, but it might be creating some chronic kind of problems in birds. Okay, then how do we treat wetlands? One was that pollution I just showed you at Shawadi. Then we use we use motorboats and all that in the wetlands. See, it's okay if we do all these things, but it is not okay if that particular wetland is used by wildlife or they are ecologically important. Okay, so this kind of motorboating is not good, I would say. Then we do all these kinds of activities, right? I'm saying that these are not good because I know what is good, and many of you might be knowing that. And then the same thing, like, you know, children are playing the routine things like swings and all that. Okay, and these wetlands, in the name of beautifications, are they are made highly artificial, you know, to the extent that they lose their naturalness. Okay, so that should not happen, because I am ecologist, I would say that. I will give you another case study which I had done. You know the Vastrapur Lake now. It is very famous recreation spot in Ahmedabad. Earlier it was a Vastrapur village pond. When I did this small study during 88-89. So this is that pond, and it had a marshy extension behind that GMDC ground. And at that time there used to be just one board that this land belongs to GMDC. I would show you the photograph. So this is a combination of pond and marsh created very nice habitat conditions for birds, especially water birds. These are some old photographs from my dissertation. So this visually it is not pleasing, but they are very productive. Lots of vegetation there for the herbivorous birds and many other aquatic insects inside that wetland, which are useful for carnivorous birds. Different views of the wetland. This is the marshy extension. That is the GMDC board, that this land belongs to them. This is called Sarkari Wasahat. It's a very big colony, and the sewage from that colony was very good source for nutrients. And even Saras crane, which is a tallest flying bird in the world, found in India, was regularly breeding there. And it is globally threatened bird. You might have heard the term IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. They have categorized various species into 4 classes, like critically endangered, vulnerable, and near threatened. So this Saras crane is now globally vulnerable. Okay, and it was breeding here every year, because though my study was for 1 year, I used to go there just as a casual bird watcher before and after that. So I know that they were regular breeders here. About 90 species of birds were recorded there, and 60 species of it included 60 species of water birds and 30 species of migratory birds, the birds which come to India from Europe, Northern Asia, and Central Asia. Okay, charismatic birds like greater flamingos and sarus cranes were coming there, and variety of resident and migratory ducks use that wetland as also the shore birds. So these are the glimpses of those different types of birds which use that marshy extension, as well as Vastrapur village pond, not this modern pond. Okay. This is a painted stork, spoonbill, different types of ducks here. Then purple heron, painted stork, again some pintail ducks. This is a resident duck, godwit. These are the different types of birds, and many of them are migratory. Other aquatic organisms were also present, like this plant called typha. It's a hydrophyte, limnophyton, and the insects like pond scatus. Again, some other plants like Marsilia and this duckweed here. Snakes and frogs were also recorded. So why I'm saying all this? Because, see, Gujarat University is very near to that. And even CEPT is not far from that. So it can be used as a research center. Why not? Right? Now the story is over. That marsh is no more existing. But it is our bad luck that it is not used for these purposes shown here. Okay, small wetland park could also be created there for bird watching and for nature education activity. A wetland interpretation center could have been created there, and again it could be wetland research extension for these universities, just like that Ohio State University. But all these things happened there, right? Recreation is also possible from these nature-based activities. But unfortunately, nowadays it is a trend that only these things are being repeated. Even at Lakhota, Lake Jamnagar, laser show, amusement park, then very big fountains, and then boats, luckily not motorboats everywhere. But all those things are not conducive to ecological conservation. Okay, and other thing is that we are taking the citizen away from nature. A little bit of thinking could take those citizens towards nature using these wetlands, but we are not doing that. So I would repeat that every wetland is not necessarily good from biodiversity point of view, but at least we should take care that if out of 10 urban wetlands, 5 are good for birds and other. See, birds are there because other elements in the food chains are also present. So they are very good systems ecologically. So if some wetland is like that, then let us not do this kind of development every time. See, even at Lakota, the same thing. Amusement park, giant wheel, okay? I would show later on. So Lakota is amid the city, very important point. And still about 70 species of birds have been recorded there. And it's a cultural heritage also, because it was, though it exists since hundreds of years, one Maharaja of Jamnagar, the Jam Sahib, had redeveloped that wetland during that time due to high drought frequency in that area, and to help the local people to earn money by doing labor in constructing wetlands. Okay. So I think Jamnagar Municipal Corporation started that work after 2012. And same things have been repeated as I show, a light and sound show, then musical fountains and all that. Trees were cut down. Okay. I again would say that it's okay, but it is not okay because it has these things. Amid the city, if you can see such magnificent birds like pelicans and flamingos and different types of gulls, so why shouldn't we do the same kind of development of that wetland? I think I missed that. Okay. So what I want to say that because that Lakota Lake has these things, why are we doing the same things again? Why don't we think in other direction that the wetland can be developed in ecological way also? And it is happening in the developed countries. It is very common, right? Again, see a lot of paved area, okay, which gives more see, we are converting wetlands into tanks. So if they are good from biodiversity point of view, at least I believe that it should not happen. Okay. So why the authorities are not thinking in terms of managing such wetlands as wetland-based nature parks? Because that can also give relaxation and recreation both. Why don't we conserve them as urban blues, just like urban greens, you know? Why can't we see them as natural or semi-natural pockets amidst the concrete jungle? Because only those pockets will have some natural ecological processes going on, and it should be considered a precious thing. Then why can't we see them as contributors to the quality of life for many urbanites? Nowadays, many urbanites are fond of nature and wildlife and everything. So they can get all these things at doorstep without going to far off places. Okay. Simple structure, if created like this, it can encourage lots of bird watchers, which are many in Gujarat. Gujarat is very rich in people having wildlife as a hobby or bird watching as a hobby. Sometimes they give very good data to we scientists. Okay, so they are very deep into this subject. So they would definitely welcome such step. And maybe this kind of walkboard, it can be created. And all these things can be done at low cost. Okay, and very easily. And these kinds of watchtowers. And these kinds of some display board which would give some sense to people that yeah, these kinds of things are existing here and they would like to know more about that. Okay, simple but very effective things can be done at our urban wetlands. I remember that Vastrapur Lake, if these things had done at that time, I would say eco-friendly development could be done for that wetland. One more film I would try to show. This is a Hong Kong wetland park.
A celebration of wetlands all around the world, and a wonderful opportunity to learn more about Hong Kong's special wetland habitat. This is a vital initiative which has captured the imagination of architects, designers, and conservationists. Together they have built a world-class conservation, education, and eco society. Here in a 61-hectare park, you will find some of Hong Kong's rarest and most fascinating creatures. Here you can discover the wonder of wetlands and learn how all life on Earth is intimately bound to these magnificent habitats. Wetlands Park is yours to enjoy. To learn more about the amazing habitats that keep the world alive. To learn about the flights which take place. And to learn what you can do in your own community to protect and enjoy the natural beauty of wetlands. Visit the wetlands and you'll discover much more than you could ever imagine.
Another film, but I would not show because I think time is less. Sri Lanka also has this kind of wetland park. See, in India, we don't have this kind of wetland parks, but we certainly have bird sanctuaries. Nalsaro is the biggest example. It is the oldest water bird sanctuary. In Porbandar, we have a urban sanctuary of birds. And there are some other sanctuaries. If you take Little Run of Kutch, it has a sanctuary called Wildlife Sanctuary. So it is a wildlife sanctuary because it behaves like a wetland for 4 or 5 months. It supports lots of birds. Okay, so, but when we are talking about urban wetlands, these kinds of wetland parks can be considered, which can serve multiple purposes like environmental awareness, research, and other things, relaxation point. So I think I would stop here. And if you have any questions, I would try to answer them. So just a minute. Can I change the folder? Can it be shown? No. Actually, Foundation for Ecological Welfare is a not-for-profit company, rather, and we carry out one-day wetland exploration to some not very remote wetlands from Ahmedabad, and we orient the students, college and school students, for enjoying the wetlands in a real sense. So we introduce how to identify birds and what are their roles in that wetland, and apart from birds, what are other organisms. Like we try to teach them how to identify wetland plants, wetland insects, and other forms of life dependent on them, and how the entire wetland system functions. So all that is explained in situ. Then we also I think it is not come. It's okay. We also publish one magazine which is freely available. You can just write to few.ecology@gmail.com and we will send you freely. So the name of that magazine is Jal Plavit. It's a Sanskrit word of wetland. So it has many articles, interesting articles from different states of India and even from US. So you would enjoy reading that magazine also. So you can just write to few.ecology@gmail.com, and I would welcome questions, not very difficult questions. Yes, please.
I've come across a lot of studies which tell about the diversity of birds in various wetlands or various areas.
Yes.
But is there any studies that tell about the habitats of individual birds, both abiotic and biotic?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, people have tendency to concentrate on species only. So I would definitely say that compared to the species studies, habitat studies are less in India, I would say. But they are not absent. For example, I carried out a study on Nal Sarovar. It was based on, it was habitat study only using remote sensing technique. But yeah, you are right that habitat studies are less compared to species level study.
Yeah, for us as landscape architects, that become a little more important because if you have to develop...
Definitely, sir. Definitely.
Yeah, so,
I completely agree with that. See, one more thing, that in developed countries like US, they have very good practice of wetland delineation, which is not here, which is not done here. Wetland delineation means they would, for example, I'm a landowner and I want to say, I want to check to what extent my property is not having wetland, because I want to have that land, you know. So there are professional certified wetland biologists who work for them, of course, by taking very nice fees, and then they delineate that up to this boundary there is a pure land and then there is wetland. So that wetland delineation is highly required in India, and you guys are very good for that. In that, they not only do this remote sensing based analysis, in which they see the maximum extent of water spread for number of years, maybe for 10 years or something like that. So of course that is just one parameter, the water spread, maximum water spread area. Then they also check the hydric soil. They take sample from different sites and then say they check up to what extent that hydric soil is present, right? Then they have a ratio of obligate wetland plants and facultative wetland plants. So higher the proportion of obligate wetland plants, more will be the possibility of that land being wetland. So this kind of database does not exist in India. We don't know how to check hydric soil. We know that, but we don't do that. Secondly, we don't have list of hydrophytic plants which can be considered as obligate or facultative wetland plants. Okay, so we have to develop that. Only promise for us is that we can study the remote sensing data, and if we can monitor the water spread behavior for multiple years, right? And from that we can say that, okay, this up to this level there may be wetland boundary, and out of that, beyond that, there would be a terrestrial system. So this wetland delineation is extremely important, and I think you people can do it in very nice manner. Secondly, in US there is a law called Clean Water Act, 1954 probably. There is a rule that if I am converting one wetland for some non-wetland purpose, I would have to create another wetland of the same area, at least. If you increase the area, that is well and good, but at least that much area has to be created again as a wetland. So these kinds of rules are not existing in India, and they are required. Okay, so, and all these things come under the purview of habitat analysis. So that's a very good point, that habitat, if a particular animal is there, that means its suitable habitat is there. Otherwise it cannot come, it cannot survive. So you can definitely do habitat modeling also, right? And the delineating the habitat is very primary thing. But on the basis of that, you can also find out if there is a particular habitat called bog habitat. So you can study for the particular area, and then you can project for entire state or something like that. The modeling is also done in these cases. Yes.
Before we start with the habitat,
yeah.
First there should be demarcation of like what exactly is that wetland, because when it comes to the wetland, many times when we see the land use plan,
yeah.
It is about either it is marked as a water body,
yeah,
or some wasteland. But where it comes, when it comes to the wetland, it is more dynamic. Like the shifting of the water always takes place.
Yes, yes.
So
that's
that
why I
case,
told
like,
that wetland delineation is very much required. Wetlands are considered as very dynamic systems, unlike water bodies.
Yeah.
Wetlands, if you go to Nal Sarovar, there won't be, you may find that absence of water completely in the month of May or April. Okay, at that time you would think that it is not a wetland, but just visual observation is not enough. You have to do some, you have to apply some parameter and test those parameters.
But certainly it is, I mean, like it is beyond, I think, landscape architects job, because it's also concerned with the land use planning, like
right,
how we usually go with that
So I think it is always advisable to have a team of specialists. So in a team there can be ecologists, there can be landscape architects, and maybe even some biologists. So now, as far at least I believe that this is a time for teamwork of different professionals, professionals from different fields.
Okay, like as you mentioned, most of the lakes or the water bodies in Gujarat, like
yes,
so in actually marking them, demarking them as a proper wetland, like
okay.
have you? I mean, like what is any specific approach that you followed? Like I mean, like working with specialists. Like, can you share that? Like, it would be helpful to us.
See, I am very frank to tell you that we basically follow the water spread area as far as remote. But we would also take into account the spread of aquatic vegetation. For example, Nal Sarovar water spread area may be ending here, but the hydrophytic plants may be going up to that level. So we have to include that also as wetland, not just water spread. But we don't check hydric soil characteristics and all that. So it is actually required.
Okay, like, yeah, but we also sometimes identify the potential, but when it comes to the actual project, like whom exactly to approach, like that is what actually missing from the real case scenario from Indian
yeah, I would say you have to approach people like SACON, Salim Ali Center for Ornithology and Natural History, which is in Coimbatore, then Bombay Natural History Society. They are very deep in Wildlife Institute of India. So these people are relatively highly experienced, you know, in all the different fields of ecology. Yeah. Yes, sir. Wetlands. Yeah.
In a couple of our projects, we have also realized that you need to provide corridors or extended areas for reptile movement and amphibian movement. Because they then become the food for the...
Okay. Yeah. I would say that would be very, very good thinking, because, you know, people usually think about birds only. And they can very easily go from one place to other place, because they have flight as a power for transportation. But these small creatures like amphibians and reptiles, they have to gradually move from one place to another place. So if you are thinking about their corridors, it's really, really good. And yeah, but I think it is difficult also, because we don't have proper information about their habitat requirement. You can apply some rules, but I think it is difficult. But it is good to think in that direction, certainly. So corridors of small animals, I think in India it is a very advanced stage. You are thinking right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tatu. It was a very informative presentation, and the studies you showed us are indeed very important to understand the nuances of landscape.